Hi there, my name is Lisa Wolf of the Center for Humanistic Change. Welcome to our presentation, The Vaping Epidemic for Middle School Students. I just want to mention that our presentations are funded in part by Lehigh and Northampton County Divisions of Drug and Alcohol, which allows us to do these programs for you at no cost. So whenever I talk about any kind of drugs, including nicotine and vaping, I need to talk about the adolescent brain, your middle school brain. When you're born, the back part of your brain is pretty well developed. The part that's responsible for your physical coordination, eyesight, things like that, you're pretty much born with that developed. As you get older, the middle part of your brain starts to develop. And about your age, your middle part of your brain, which includes cognition, memory, and other things, is well developed as well. The last part of the brain to develop is the front of the brain, prefrontal cortex, and that's responsible for things like decision-making, complex problem solving. And that part of your brain does not finish developing or fully mature until about the age of 25. So if you're a middle schooler watching this, you're probably between the ages of 12 and 14, which means you have at least twice as, another 12, 13 years of brain development to go. And this is the reason why using or starting any kind of drug use at your age can really be disastrous for you for the rest of your life. Even by delaying any kind of use into your 20s, the chances of addiction, the chances of changing the brain forever really decrease. It is drug use, including nicotine, alcohol, marijuana, or any other drug at your age that really can spell problems for you, not only right now, but also for your future. So I want you to picture this as your brain, okay? This is the LA freeway system. And as you can see, there's different levels. It's going in all kinds of different directions. You have traffic coming in from all different parts of the city. And I want you now to picture this freeway system and a huge boulder rolling down a mountain and landing in the middle of it. So what would happen to this freeway system? Well, parts of it would be destroyed. Some people, of course, would be killed in their cars. It would prohibit people from getting to different parts of the city because they wouldn't be able to get on, connecting to this part of the system. And it pretty much would mess things up for a long time. Now, could they repair the freeway system? They could, but it would probably take years. And in the end, we don't really know if it would work as well as it did up until this point. So now I want you to think of this as your brain. So your brain, there are a lot of pathways and connections being made in your brain. At your age, you are coalescing and integrating everything you've been learning from the time you were little, all coming together. Eventually, some of these pathways will be paired off because you don't really need them anymore. And as an adult, your brain will be much more efficient with a lot less chaos. So the drug in this scenario is that boulder. If you put drugs into your body and into your brain, you could interfere with your development. You could make changes physically in the brain that don't ever repair. You certainly will change the way the brain functions. You could see issues with cognitive development, emotional development, and really it's the worst time really in your life to use drugs would be before the age of 25, but especially as a middle schooler. So that's why, I always want to say that I don't condone any kind of drug use, but drug use, particularly at a young age, can really set you up for a lifetime of problems. So when we talk about addiction or substance use disorder, when we think of somebody who has an addiction, often we have a picture of someone who might be poor, they might be dirty, they live in the streets. We associate needles with people like that. We might think that they aren't as moral as we are. We might think, why don't they just stop? They just need to have more willpower. And we have really learned a lot more about the brain over the last few years. And now we know that addiction, or the new terminology, substance use disorder, is actually a disease of the brain. When you take drugs, you change the structure of the brain and how it functions. And then people with addiction have an uncontrollable desire to continue using those drugs no matter how bad it gets. So they can lose their jobs, lose their families, lose their homes, and they'll just protect that addiction. They'll lie, cheat, and steal because their brain basically is fooling them into thinking that's all they need. When you're dealing with somebody with addiction, they are very different from who they would be if they were sober. So I think we have to have compassion for people with addiction because, yes, trying drugs for the first time is a choice. The average age of first use is 13 or 14. And remember, I just talked about how people at that age don't make the best decisions. And, just by making a decision like this at this point in your life could set you up for this. And we need to treat it as a disease because people do get better. They can go into recovery. Almost 24 million people in the United States live a life of recovery. Chances are you know someone in recovery and you don't even realize it because someone with an addiction looks like you and they look like me. And I think having more compassion for people and reaching out a hand to help them means that they do have a shot at recovery. So now I'm going to get into the vaping portion. I'm going to ask you a few questions and see what you really know about vaping. So we know that the different flavors have been the reason so many people got into vaping. So do you guys have any idea how many flavors of e-juices or e-cigarettes are out there? There are more than 7,000. I have seen up to 15,000 different flavors. A lot of them are very sweet, like the apple pie, cherry, grape, mango, that are definitely designed to pull in younger users. They also have a flavor called dirty ashtray and leather. Don't understand why people want to use those, but I'm sure there's a market for them. So if you see a vape product, so this could be a vaping cigarette, or it could be the bottles of juice that you can get. It says nicotine free. But what answer do you think follows that? So even if a vape product is labeled nicotine free, it may contain nicotine. There has not been a lot of government oversight over the past years over who was manufacturing it. And even though it says nicotine free, it may have some nicotine in it, very low levels, but the whole goal is to get you hooked. So nicotine is the drug that will do that. The amount of nicotine in a Juul pod, I'm guessing most of you know what a Juul is, that you have seen that. Juul actually has about 70% of the market. Now, there's been some changes to the flavors of those pods, and I will talk about that. But let's just talk about the amount of nicotine in a Juul pod. So it's equivalent to what? And the answer there is 2 packs of cigarettes. And I'll get into that in more detail in a minute. What percent of people or of adults who smoke or vape start before the age of 18? And it's 90%. So the goal is to get you as a customer before you're 18 years old, because if they get you, they have you for life. And remember, with your immature brain, you are less likely to think through the consequences and really think about whether you even want to try or start vaping or smoking. So if they can get you at that young age and get you hooked, they've got a customer for life. Somebody over the age of 25 is much less likely to start smoking or vaping because now they have that decision-making capability and they think about it and decide not to do it. So the term vaping is really not accurate. Do you know why? So the answer to that is vape products produce aerosol, and it's not actually water vapor, and I will talk about that in more detail. So last year, a 16-year-old in Texas had to have a double lung transplant because he had become ill with a vaping disease that was in the news a lot. We don't know for sure, but it appears to be that most people who got sick with that vaping disease were actually vaping marijuana or THC oil, not necessarily nicotine. However, a lot of people do vape both. So his lungs were so badly damaged, he had to have a double lung transplant. So what is his life expectancy now? 5 years. Most people who have, there's a 50-50 chance that someone with a lung transplant will still be alive in 5 years. So that's all they've done is buy him some time. He will never live to be an old man. And I think that is so heartbreaking, someone so young. So now let's get into nicotine and vaping devices. So nicotine is a drug. It does not make you high the way marijuana or alcohol might, but it is considered a drug. It is highly addictive. If you've ever known anyone who smokes and they try to quit, you know, if you've seen it, how difficult it can be. As a drug, it causes the release of dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical in the middle of your brain, in the pleasure center of your brain, that is released when you do something you like. So if you like listening to music or being with your friends, the reason you enjoy those things is dopamine is released into your brain, and that motivates you to repeat that behavior. It's something you like, it feels good, you want to do it again. Well, nicotine releases that dopamine, and that affects how we feel. Gives us, makes us more alert, feelings of pleasure, and that reinforces the use. Nicotine is also a stimulant, which means it revs up the body, makes your heart beat faster, it might raise your blood pressure, and at your age, we don't worry about that so much, but as you get older, that definitely becomes an issue. Okay, so there it is, repeats again, it's a stimulant, so it releases the adrenaline, increases your heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure. Also, with nicotine, it makes you feel more awake. So if it's an afternoon, instead of having a candy bar, somebody goes to the bathroom and has a couple hits of their Juul, they'll be more awake and more focused. At the same time, for a lot of people, it makes them feel more relaxed. So if they're anxious or worried, that nicotine can help kind of make them feel less anxious. So I already mentioned dopamine. So now I want to show you how that works with the brain. So when you take in that nicotine, that stimulant goes up into your brain, okay, right in the middle of your brain there, and then it releases the dopamine. And that lasts for all of about 10 seconds. And if you keep repeating that behavior, your brain is going to say to you, do that again. That felt good. Do that again. And before you know it, you find yourself thinking about it, wanting it, craving it to get that feeling from the nicotine. So what happens is we have an increase in tolerance over time. So let's say I start smoking cigarettes, and I'm smoking one cigarette every 2 or 3 hours. That's enough. I'm getting that dopamine I want, that feeling of being more awake, maybe relaxation. But eventually, I need more to get that same feeling. So now I start smoking 3 cigarettes every 2 or 3 hours to get that same thing. And that works for a while. But you see people will start out maybe smoking 1 pack of cigarettes, over 2 weeks. Then it's 1 week, then it's 3 days. And then before they know it, they're smoking a pack a day. The exact same thing happens with vaping. Nicotine is that chemical they have in common that keeps people coming back for more. So what if I stop? People, when they stop smoking, they go through withdrawal. So there are the physical symptoms. They might sweat a little more. They might be nauseous and tired. And then they have the emotional or psychological component of being quicker to anger, feeling on edge, being depressed. And that's what we see people go through with a lot of drugs. An extreme example, that would be heroin. People go through those symptoms, but 1,000 times worse, but the same kinds of symptoms. But still, that's what people go through. And in order to relieve those symptoms, all they have to do is go hit that vape again, and it takes care of all those feelings. This is why it is so difficult for people to stop. So how does nicotine affect the body? As a drug, it rewires and changes your brain like any drug that's addictive. As a stimulant, it'll make your heart beat faster. Obviously, you're putting something in your lungs that doesn't belong there, so you can damage the lungs, have trouble breathing. And especially now with this COVID-19 virus, somebody who smokes or vapes, they're already compromising their lungs. So if they catch that virus, it may be a little harder for them to recover. And it also can affect your digestive system. So let me just compare these two devices. So on the right, you have the big device that's a refillable tank, right? So you might see that. That's the one that makes the big plumes of vapor. It's not easy to hide that, because people are going to see you doing it. That's common with people who see vaping as a hobby. And then the jewel on the left is a device that so many people have gotten hooked on. It has that disposable pod. It gives you a good hit of nicotine. It's easy to conceal. It doesn't create a lot of vapor when you use it. One of the biggest differences is the type of nicotine that's used. In the vape, any kind of pod system like a Juul or a Swarin or Enjoy uses salt-based nicotine, and that's much smoother. So because it's so smooth, it keeps people coming back again to use it more. Has more nicotine, I'll get into that more in a minute, than other devices use. And like I said, you have the pods versus the refillable tank. So let's look at the nicotine levels. So a pack of cigarettes, 20 cigarettes. Each cigarette is about 10 puffs. So 20 times 10, 200 puffs in a pack of cigarettes and 20 milligrams of nicotine. A Juul pod is also about 200 puffs, but it's twice as much nicotine. A fix, which is a device we don't see a lot around here, but it's common, is 200 puffs, but it's like smoking 75 cigarettes. And then the Swarin is about 200 puffs, but has as much nicotine as 4.5 packs of cigarettes. All of these pod systems have high levels of nicotine, and there is only one reason to have that much nicotine. It doesn't make it taste better. It doesn't change your experience other than it gets you hooked a lot quicker. So let's talk more about what is in the act, the chemical composition, and what you're inhaling into your lungs. So you guys have had a lot of education about cigarettes. You've been learning this since you were little. Smokers are very stigmatized now. They have to be outside. Smoking is prohibited in everywhere you go, pretty much. But these are some of the chemicals that you might have learned. There are actually thousands of chemicals in cigarettes, but these are some of them that are in cigarettes. So what is in vape juice? So a couple years ago, we didn't really know. They weren't required to report it, but as they are under more and more oversight, they must tell us what's in it. These are some of the chemicals that are in e-juice. It is estimated there are 300 to 400 different chemicals in e-juice, and the ones that come up orange are known to be harmful or potentially harmful, and many of these are the same chemicals you find in a cigarette. So there's nicotine, formaldehyde, which is found in embalming fluid. That's how we preserve dead bodies. Heavy metals like lead or nickel. There is arsenic, which is used in rat poison. These are the things that you are inhaling when you use a vape device or vape juice. So I'll just show you some of these chemicals are also in antifreeze, nail polish remover, paints and pesticides, embalming fluid, there you go, nicotine, and rubidium, which is used in fireworks. This is what you're putting into your body. So at the beginning, I asked why vaping was an inaccurate term, and it's because it's really not water vapor. So if I would spray water throughout the room, water is composed of hydrogen and oxygen, It wouldn't hurt anybody. You could drink it, put it on your skin, leave it in, on surfaces, it'll evaporate, and it doesn't leave anything behind. And if you look at someone who's vaping, it looks very much like steam or heated water, right? But what if I walked in with a can of hairspray and started spraying that around? So that has a number of chemicals in it. And I'm talking about the hairspray that's an aerosol spray, so you get that big cloud. When you're inhaling e-juices or from pods, it is actually an aerosol. An aerosol does not just evaporate. It leaves behind particles. So if you inhale steam, which some people might do if they have like congestion, we might do that. You're inhaling heated water into your lungs, and that's not going to hurt you. However, when you are vaping, you're inhaling particles in an aerosol that are going to sit in your lungs. It is not water vapor. It is aerosol. So here's a quick comparison. So, vapor is what we associate with, see if I can move this a little bit, with steam or fog, right? And then aerosol is a mixture of liquid particles suspended in a gas, and it can leave drops and particles behind. So no, it's not vapor, it's not water, it's not juice, it's not a couple chemicals inside water. It is a lot of chemicals inside an aerosol. So when these devices were invented, they came out about 12, 13 years ago. They were marketed as a way for people to quit smoking. And it looked like a pretty good idea, because up until this point, all we really had were nicotine gum and nicotine patches. They are not very effective. So this looked like a great alternative, because not only were you replacing that addictive drug, that nicotine, you're also replacing the habit, the behavior that a lot of people enjoy when they smoke. It's having that thing in their fingers and putting that into their mouth. And the goal was that people would start at a higher nicotine level, because juices come in different levels, and as they came down on different levels, eventually could get down to 0 or near 0 nicotine, and hopefully at that point be able to give it up. Did it work? Yeah. Some people quit smoking that way. Not many though. And really, if you think about it, that was a finite market. Now, who are they going to, if everybody quit, who are they going to sell to? So they really came after teens. They really advertised to people who were 13, 14, 15. They made vaping sound cool, right? Because people who still smoke cigarettes are aging. There aren't as many new young cigarette smokers. Teen smoking is way down from where it used to be. Who's going to replace them? It's you guys. So by getting you to vape, we had a whole new market. So they started selling it to you, putting it in your social media. It shows up in the movies and TV shows you watch. It is marketed as being cool. They talk about it's not as gross as smoking, and it's not, because you don't have the smell, the smoke, the cigarette butts, the ash. But just because you can't see what's in it doesn't mean there aren't harmful things in it. So as I said earlier too, the reason they want you guys is they get you at your age when your brain is more susceptible to addiction. They get you for life, and that's why 90% of people who smoke or vape as adults start before 18. The flavors, again, definitely marketed at you. I mentioned this in the beginning. Okay. This is where I want to mention some changes in the law. So in December of 2019, they banned all flavors of disposable pods, like the Juul pod, except for tobacco and menthol, which those are the flavors that regular cigarettes come in. However, they didn't ban the bottles of e-juice. So if you look on the upper left, the lemon, banana, and coffee, those are still available to buy, or disposables like the cherry limeade in the middle, or those boxes on the left, apple pie and blueberry muffin. Those are ones that you would use until you're done and then you toss it. So they're still out there if you guys really want to find them. But I'm hoping by listening to what I'm saying to you today that, these companies don't care about you. They don't care about your health. They don't care about your future. They want you as a customer because they want to sell you a product, period. And, you know, when you think about it, it's quite despicable. I would argue that as an adult, you are free to make your own decisions. But you guys, as young as you are, like I said earlier, aren't always thinking through all the consequences. And I want you to think about this because this could become a lifetime habit if you start now. So health effects of vaping. I already talked about some of these, but I want to review. Absolutely, it's going to affect the lungs. The heart, because of it's a stimulant, increasing your heart rate and your blood pressure. It's going to affect your nasal passages and your throat. We know any kind of drug like nicotine changes the structure and function of the brain, right? So in the future, if you start now, it could increase your risk of heart disease, emotional stress, there could be damage to DNA. This is really no different than what you see with people who smoke long term. We don't yet know the long-term effects of e-cigarettes and vape pens because they're so new, but we can pretty much figure it's going to be similar to cigarettes. Popcorn lung, we have seen some of this in people who vape. So popcorn lung is a disease that people get who work in microwave popcorn factories. There's this chemical diacetyl that is in the microwave butter flavor that goes in the popcorn. And when they're working in the factory, they're breathing it in 40 hours a week. And so some of them get this popcorn lung. And what happens is you get scarring inside the bronchioles, which really narrows the passageway. So imagine having to breathe through a straw or a coffee stir. That's what it would feel like. So diacetyl is in that microwave popcorn butter. It's also in these flavors, just something to think about. So I talked about the change in the flavored pods not being sold anymore. Some of the other changes, the federal government made it illegal to sell tobacco to anyone under 21. That law is also been passed by Pennsylvania, will go into effect on July 1st. So now the age up till now had been 18, now it's 21. Pennsylvania will make an exception for people in the military or people who are retired from the military. Also, if you get caught, if you're an adult or a minor, you get caught on public school grounds with vaping or smoking materials, you could actually get like what's like a ticket. So as an adult, you would pay a fine, but for someone who is under that age of 18, they might have you do community service. So it won't just be the policies your school puts into place. There's also a Pennsylvania law around that. So I hope you learned something from the presentation. If you have any questions, you absolutely can email me. My email address is up there. I also would urge you to visit our website. We are continuing to put more videos up there. Shortly, I will have current drug trends for middle school students up there and our choices, chances, changes presentation, which is education about opioids and heroin, specifically for 8th graders. So as they go up there, you know, they'll be going up there the next week or so. Please feel free to check them out. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful day.